Hello, well this is very exciting. A first look at Icom's new flagship HF radio, the IC-7760. As you can see, it is quite a beast. It's a big lad. The other thing you would probably notice about it is it's taking up most of my desktop here, which could be a problem if it wasn't for the fact that we don't need to have this on the desktop because we drive the radio from here. So this is the control head. And this is all we need to have on the desktop, which will do everything in terms of controlling the radio. So we can tuck this away somewhere else. It just connects this one to this one via a LAN cable. So we could put this under the desk, out of the way, and just have this on the desktop. Or, very cleverly, we could put this somewhere remotely in the house. For example, up in the garage, so that the cabling only has to come in there. And we could put this on a rack or on a shelf in the garage, connect it into our network, and then we can connect this via a LAN cable into a network connection down here, and just have this on the table. There's a lot of flexibility in how you can set it up, but for the purposes of our demo today, I'm going to just put it down on the floor here. So what we do need to do is spin it round so you can see all the connectors, show you the connectors on the control head, and fire it up and make it work. We've spun the IC-7760 round so that we can show you the connectors on the back. There's quite a lot of them. And we'll start with the obvious 4 antenna connectors here, and you can choose separate antennas for the 2 separate receivers in this, and it's all switchable from the radio. Transverter output here. Receive antennas. Now one's labelled in and one's labelled out, so you can connect a receive only antenna there. From the output you could perhaps connect that to, I don't know, an external SDR if you wanted to, and share, or another receiver and share those antennas. Or you can use the in and out together and use an external filter if you wanted to. You can put a 10 MHz reference signal in here. This connector is for the Icom tuner, which is for, say, the long wire antennas. The external tuner, so it does have a built-in tuner, but if you're using an external tuner, that's a controller there. This is the, and it's important when you're connecting this up, you don't mix the two up because they're identical sockets, they're LAN sockets, but this one is where we will connect the control head via a LAN cable if we're connecting directly, and this you can connect into your local area network. And you're going to want to connect that anyway because you're going to want this to be connected to the internet. It'll pick up its time info and stuff from the web, but also if you're going to remote control it using the remote control software that's available from Icom, you can control it from anywhere in the world on your PC and dial into the radio and control it, and the server is built into the radio. We've got a remote socket here. Now this has got, you know, with Icom you have the CIV instructions for the radio to interact with external software or controlling other things, and that's where the information is going to come out that would control the matching linear to go with this. If you're using an Icom linear with it, that will pick up those instructions, and we'll be talking in a separate review about the new 1 kilowatt linear that Icom have just brought out. You would connect that here into this remote socket. Key, well, we know what that is. That's for your CW key, and that's your ALC connection for if you're using it with a linear. We'll show you some clever stuff when we do the review of the linear in a separate review about how it automatically sets itself up. But with a lot of linears, you do need that ALC to make sure you don't overdrive the linear, so that's important. And this send socket here is for a non-Icom linear to send control signals to that, to switch it from transmit to receive. 2 accessory sockets here. Icom love these DIN sockets, and they've appeared on Icom radios for years, and you can get various things out of the accessory sockets, audio and other bits and bobs that you might want to connect up. And also, of course, if you're going to connect something like the external linear amplifier, that's going to be connected via that as well, because it's going to get the band switching information via that socket. This one here, well, we know what that is. That's a USB socket, and that's for connecting into your PC. Ground post here, yes, you do need to connect to a good ground. That's a bit of important station setting up discipline. And finally, the power socket and power switch. Interestingly, it's ready to go. You don't have to set the voltage for your area. It will run on anything from 90 to 264 volts, and that's 50 or 60 hertz. So what we need to do is show you now the connectors for the control head, and then we'll be able to fire it up and make it go. Okie dokes, let's have a look at the connectors on the control head then. And we'll start off with the speakers. You can see on the top of the control head here, we've got two speakers. Now, if you're just using one receiver, then it's going to route the audio to both of the speakers. But if you're using the main and the sub receiver, then it'll route the audio to the respective speakers. Now, moving down to the connectors, this one, very well labelled, the RF deck, tells you that's where you're going to put your LAN cable that is connect directly to the RF deck. Or if the RF deck was not in the shack with you but somewhere else and you wanted to connect to it remotely through your LAN, you would just connect that directly into your local area network. An external display output here, so we can connect an external monitor, which is really useful because you can see a big version of the display that's on the front of the radio. And then we've got two USB connectors here, so these are USB-A connectors, and you could use that for connecting an external mouse, for example, which we'll demo later on, which you can use for click and pounce on the waterfall display, and you also can connect an external keyboard if you wanted to as well. Or I'm going to use it to connect the optional Icom RC28 controller, which is like an external tuning knob because it makes tuning the sub receiver separately a lot easier. So I'm going to use it for that. You can plug that in there. Now this is a USB-B connector, and that we can connect directly into our computer. And you remember there was a connector on the RF deck as well, so you've got the option either way of connecting your computer directly to the RF deck for your digital modes, or you can connect it via the controller, and that will work fine as well. An extension keypad, this is useful for CW keying memories or digital mode keying memories. You can use the external keypad for that. You can connect your electronic keyer here and send. This again is for the control of transmit for non-Icom external devices to tell it you're switching to transmit. And next to that, a line in and a line out. So line in, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you want to have an external audio source other than the mic socket on the front to put audio into the radio, you could go in there and you can take line level audio out from here. Or interestingly, you could switch it in the radio so that instead of giving you audio out there, it gives you a 12 kilohertz IF output, which you could put perhaps into an external SDR. And external speakers for A and B. And finally, the DC input, it comes with its own bulwark type power supply, so you need to plug that in wherever you're using this. You have got to power it up to make it work. So that's what we really need to do. Let's connect it all up, power it up, and make it do its stuff. So we have connected the control head up via its LAN cable to the RF deck, which is down there on the floor. We've plugged its wall-warped power supply in, so it's ready to rock. Oh, and you might notice as well, it's now standing on this plastic stand, which is kind of handy, which just, it comes with the control head, and it just gives you a little bit better angle to use it on your desk. And also you can see what a small footprint it has on the desk. When you think of all the facilities there are in this radio and all the antenna connectors and everything else, that's all tucked away, out of sight, and this is all you need on your desktop. So let's switch it on. There's a little bit of a delay while the control head talks to the RF deck. They fire up, and there we go. We've got just one receiver activated at the moment. If I turn up the volume here, you'll hear audio coming off that one, silence off the other one at the moment. So the audio is going from this receiver to both speakers at the moment. Now, just before I start showing you the controls and the knobs and everything else, let's just talk a bit about the specs. Now, the IC-7760 has two independent receivers, so it's a main and a sub, and they both have identical performance. But the point is, they can be on different bands. They can even be using different antennas. There's 4 antenna connectors, as we showed you on the back of the RF deck. I've only got 2 HF antennas, so that's what I've got connected up. But I could be using different antennas for each of the receivers. It covers all of the HF bands from 160 meters through to 6 meters. And it adopts direct RF sampling. And that means you get a lot less distortion than you do with the traditional analog mixing. And that processing enables it to, through that LAN connection, either plug directly or through your LAN system, it can handle the complex audio path switching and the interface switching and all the other things that are going to be going on over that LAN connection, but with minimum delay. So you don't get a big lag between what's happening on the RF deck and what happens here. So your controls feel instant and your audio's not lagging behind. So we've got it fired up. Let's have a look at what it can do. Right, the next thing to do is to fire it up with two receivers running. So at the moment we've got our main receiver running and we've got one waterfall on show here. Just before I switch in the second receiver, let's just show you some of the stuff that will be very familiar to people who already own, say, an Icom 7300 or a 9700 or a 705. If you want to change bands, you just touch on here and you can select the band you want, or you can press frequency input and you can directly input the frequency that you want. If you want to change mode, then you touch the mode there, touch USB, and there's our options there. Interestingly, you see it offers PSK or RTTY, and it does have, as we'll show you in a bit, a built-in RTTY decoder and encoder and a built-in PSK decoder and data if we're going to be using one of our data modes. So that's how we select our mode. We're on upper sideband at the moment, and we have the waterfall here. You can look at the waterfall in two ways. You can center fix it, which means that as you turn the tuning knob, the waterfall seems to move up and down past a central point. If I just turn the volume up so you can hear a signal, and we'll tune it in there. Oh, he's gone the second I tuned him in. But if I wanted to go to that frequency, I can just touch on it like that. Or we can have it the other way around so that the waterfall doesn't move and we can tune across it using this moving cursor here. You can also expand the waterfall if you want. If you press expand, there we are, you get a bigger version of the waterfall there, or you can make it smaller. And if we have it on center fix like that, another menu comes up here which says span, and we can touch that one, and that will set the actual bandwidth of the waterfall so that we see how much of the particular band or how much around the frequency we're tuned to that we're going to see. So 100K, 250K, 500K, or just 2.5K, 5K, whatever. So you can have that waterfall displaying at the level of bandwidth that you want. And then we've got an interesting one here that says main and sub. Well, if we activate the sub receiver, and we do that by going over here where we have the option of change, dual and split. Change will decide which of the main or sub is over here for transmit purposes. Dual, well, that will activate the second receiver. So I'm going to press dual. There we go. This one has now come to life, and the volume controls here for each are completely separate. And the one thing that's missing now is to see both waterfalls. We've only got one waterfall displayed at the moment, and that is the main receiver waterfall. Well, we have a look on the menu for the waterfall along the bottom, and there's a button there that says dual. So if we press dual, bingo, our second waterfall appears. And the one thing that we can see from that is there's not an awful lot going on 29700 at the moment, being picked up by my Hustler antenna. Now, at the top of the screen here, you can see we have antenna 1 selected for both. I am able to highlight the second receiver, which I've done there, and I can change the antenna. I've pressed 2, and if you look at the screen now, you'll see that receiver 2 is on antenna 2, which is my Hustler vertical, and receiver 1, the main receiver, is on my G5RV. So let's now have a look at the controls that we've got on here. We'll start at the left-hand side of our control head here, and we start with the power switch up on the top. Transmit, well, they used to label that MOX for some reason, didn't they, as opposed to VOX. So if you press that, it just puts it into transmit mode. Tuner, well, you know what that does. We're here on a quiet frequency on 20 meters. If I press, and we're on the main receiver, I press tune, you can hear it click away there. It tuned fairly quickly. We'd be ready to transmit now. By the way, the tuner has 100 memories, so it will remember 100 previously tuned frequencies and close to it. So when you go back to a particular often used frequency, it may well just remember the tuning and it'll sort it out automatically. Actually, if you tune to a frequency and start transmitting, it goes mad and starts tuning itself up if you haven't tuned up on that frequency before, or if you're going to manually tune it, as I say, just press the button and then hold it in and it starts to tune away. Vox or break-in for CW, well, that's obviously does what it says on the tin. Headphones socket there. Mic socket at the bottom. Haven't got the mic plugged in yet, but we will do. We've got an automatic notch filter here, which is great. So if we press that, you see it goes up to AN there, and that will hunt out and destroy annoying heterodynes for you. There's a timer button here. This is a great idea. Supposing that you had the radio connected through your LAN, you could put it on your bedside table. You could switch on the timer here, and you could set it to come up on a particular frequency or a particular channel at a particular time of day. Your radio alarm clock could be 20 meters if you want. We've got our two independent volume controls, main receiver, sub receiver, and this outside knob here is the RF control. When it's at midday, the way I've got it set at the moment, it's doing RF and squelch. So if I turn that up so you can hear it, that would turn the RF gain down. If I did that, at midday it's at full. If I take it past midday, you can hear the squelch kicks in. So if you were on FM, maybe you might want to squelch it. I don't really use squelch on SSB, but just got it set up that way. And it's the same on the one at the bottom. So if we move now onto the touch screen itself, we'll see we've got a number of things that we can select here. So we've got antenna at the top. We can choose which antenna is connected. We've only got two connected at the moment, so we can select between 1 and 2 up there, or step through all 4 if we want. Preamp on or off, well, you can have preamp 1, preamp 2, perhaps particularly useful if you're on the higher bands, on 10 meters or 15 meters. I often put the preamp in. Attenuator off, or there we go, it's 6 dB or 12 dB of attenuation, or 18 dB, or you've got it off. Now this is interesting. The next button down is the Digital Pre-Selector. And this is great for rejecting out of band signals or signals that are far away from the frequency that you're using but might cause a bit of interference. And this is likely to happen, for example, if you were using the 7760 as a contest station, you've got other high power stations around you, they might give you a bit of interference, so you could switch on the Digital Pre-Selector and adjust that to reduce that out of band interference. And what's really good, the way this is implemented, because this is direct sampling, it means that even with the preamps in, that digital pre-selection works really well. IP on or off, AGC, set it how you want, slow, medium or fast. I've got it on medium, and compressor on or off. And now moving to this row of buttons along the bottom, the first one is menu, which takes us into the various menus of things that we might want to use. In particular is the settings menu here, where you can get into all those deep adjustments of the radio. The next one along is function, and these are quick buttons to get you to things you might want to switch on off. Switch the Vox on or off, transmit bandwidth, notch filter on and off, noise blanking, a monitor which allows you to hear your transmitted signal through the speakers, useful when you're doing digital stuff to make sure you're transmitting and you can hear it. Noise reduction, digital signal processing, and also there's an interesting one on the end here, tracking, which you can switch on or off. And this is quite handy because if you put the tracking on, then what happens is both the sub and the main receiver are on the same frequency, and as you tune, they track each other so that they'll both be exactly the same. Why would you want to do that? Well, what you can do, and I did this as a bit of a test when I was setting it up, is you could have antenna 1 and antenna 2. So antenna 1 on your main receiver, antenna 2 on your sub receiver, and as you tune along, looking at the two waterfalls or the two S meters, you'll be able to see the relative performance of your two antennas at that particular frequency. Okay, if I press quick, there we go, up comes the quick menu, and we can have various things in that menu. At the moment, that's all that's in there, so that's quick access to some adjustments we might want to make. Exit here gets us out of any of these screens we're in. We just press exit. And if we come down here at the bottom, we can just see there's an SD card slot here, which is really useful because you can save your settings, you can save your memories onto the SD card, and you can put it into another 7760 and use those same settings. The other thing that you could do is you can record audio. So you can record some of your QSO audio, or if you want to record your CQ calls, if like me, you're too lazy to just call CQ yourself and it wears your voice out, or if it's a contest call or whatever, then you can put that onto the SD card as well. Over our main tuning knob here, we can see whether we've got selected the main or sub receiver. The appropriate one lights up. We also have the sub display here, and if I press that, we're on the main receiver at the minute, so it says main, and that's showing us a close-up of the waterfall at the frequency we're tuned in. I can press it again, and up comes a quick band select for that. If we want to use that, we can tap that there, And if I tap it again, we've got a nice old style looking meter comes up for the receiver that we've got selected. So those are a few options there, and it will be displaying on that. It'll be working with whichever receiver that you've got selected, main or sub. The multi-function knob here, well, one of its functions, if we're on the sub receiver, it will tune the sub receiver for us. If we press it in, up comes this lovely menu here where we can select things that we want to adjust. So if we want to adjust the power output, we can turn that up and down, mic gain, compressor, and the digital pre-selector, which we talked about earlier, or the volume of the monitor if we're monitoring our transmitted signal. Underneath that, something again that we find on most of the Icom radios, and that's the twin passband tuning. So there we go. We can adjust the skirts of the filter that we've got selected on the frequency that we've got selected. And then underneath that, we've got the RIT. So we can move, you can actually see it's in the middle of the display there that I'm taking the receive frequency above or below the frequency we're tuned to on receive. That might be useful because you can crank it far enough to operate split, or you could be just doing it because somebody's slightly off frequency and you're trying to resolve their sideband a little bit better, or their CW. Or you can press this one, the 40X, and then as you adjust that, what you're going to be doing is adjusting your transmit frequency above and below the actual frequency we've got selected. And of course, these are always going to work on whichever main or sub that you have actually highlighted. So they'll be working on that particular receiver. In today's crowded bands, it's very important, particularly when you're running high power, this radio runs 200 watts, that you are radiating a very clean signal with minimum distortion. And that is where the DPD function comes in on the IC-7760. That's Digital Pre-Distortion. And what it does is it corrects the non-linear distortion that you might get in the final amplifier. And without getting too technical about this, what it basically does is it applies inverse distortion in advance. We won't go into all the technicalities of how that works, but trust me, when you go into function and select the DPD, that does mean your signal is a lot cleaner. And it becomes even more important when you're using this radio with its partner linear amplifier, which runs up to 1 kilowatt. And that's the new IC-PW2, which we'll be doing a separate review of later. You want to make sure that's a really clean kilowatt. And using this Icom DPD system, it will be. Up the top here, we've got a clock display, and that is very accurate timing because it's picking that up off the internet through the LAN connection through a time server. And you can set that up when you're setting the radio up so that you can regularly update it and keep your time as accurate as possible. And if you want a big version of the clock, you just touch it and it appears. Voila! And it shows the UTC offset as well there, but it's winter in the UK at the moment, so we're on UTC. Now, with whichever of your radios, the main or sub that you've got selected, you can choose to adjust the filtering. You've got 3 filter options here, 1, 2, or 3. And when you're in a particular filter, if you press and hold it, there we go. For filter 1, we could now adjust the parameters of that filter if we wanted, and it would save that as filter 1. So it's just a standard SSB filter I've got for 1, so it's 3K wide, but I could adjust it and have that filtering exactly as you want and save it, and you could do the same for the other 2 settings, and you can do the same in CW. We talked earlier on about using the RIT to vary your transmit or receive frequency, and that can work when you want to work split. Maybe there's a DX station who's listening 10 kc up or whatever, so you could do your split that way. But if you want a more complicated split or even a dual band split, then we can use the split control. So over here, we've got a button marked split, funnily enough, and if we press that in, we now have up on the screen here an indicator that tells us we're in split mode, and we're splitting between 200 and 207 for some bizarre reason. You can use it for a dual band split, you could use it for a bigger split within the same band, or maybe if you're using transverters, say for satellite work, and you've got one of these VFOs is going up on 70 sems, going to be transverted to that, and the other one on 2 meters, you could put a split in there and work full duplex and work through satellites using your transverters. We talked earlier on about the mode selection, and you just press the mode there and up come the options mode wise. So SSB, CW, AM, FM, that's fine. By the way, if you've selected FM, you do have tones available and you can set it up for repeater operation, so it'll work brilliantly on 10 meters or 6 meters through repeaters or simplex on FM. And remember, full 200 watt duty cycle as well when you're on FM. But there's two other settings here mode-wise, PSK and RTTY. Now that's interesting. Why does it offer those as modes? Well, if I press RTTY, then go into menu, I'm now offered another option in the menu that wasn't there before, which is decode. And if I click on that, we now have an RTTY decoder and transmitter. And you've got a screen here that is showing you the close-up of your decode, so you can line up with the two bars when you're tuning it in. And using an external keyboard plugged into the USB socket that I showed you on the back earlier, you could pre-program your set QSO messages or your contest messages if you're doing that. And in addition, we can go back here into the mode again and we can select PSK, and the same thing applies. If we go back into menu decode, it now comes up with a PSK decoder, and we'd be able to see the little PSK waterfall there, and it will decode PSK. Same thing, you can transmit and receive using an external keyboard. We could program up the memories for our standard QSOs or contest QSOs. Something that's very useful, little additional feature, is that if you're using either of those two modes, there's an automatic contest numbering system on there. So in CW and RTTY, each time a particular pre-programmed memory is transmitted, it will up the serial number by 1, starting at 001. So it'll keep track of your contesting for you as well. On the back of the radio, we have a DVI-D connector, which means we can connect an external monitor. So let's just do that and see what benefits that gives us. If I plug that in on the back, lo and behold, there we are. We now have on the big screen an exact replica of what we can see on the front of the radio. Now there's, as I mentioned to you before, USB sockets on the back. So into one of those I have plugged a mouse, and so now we have a cursor that we can move around. The cursor only moves within the waterfall. Okay, you can't go switching functions of the radio with this mouse. You've still got to do that from the screen. But what it does enable you to do is to pounce and listen. So if I get myself back onto SSB here, so I'm just going to change that so that we've got the waterfall fixed, and I'm moving around it. So let's see if we can find a suitable signal. Let's change the span so that we're seeing, there we go. By changing the span, we can now see a lot more of the band, and we can click on a signal. Or we can see down here what looks like a lot of FT8 going on. There we go, there's the FT8. So we can just click and pounce on any signal that we think might be interesting and fine tune it then just by dragging, holding the mouse key down and just dragging left or right. As you've seen throughout this review, the resolution on the screen on the control head is absolutely brilliant. Look at that, it's so sharp, it's clear, the contrast is great, and it's really easy to see what you're doing. And you will note that the cursor is there for my external mouse, so we can use it even without the big screen. But just as it is, taking up that small footprint on your desk, I'm really impressed with it. And I should just point out as well, you can see, look, if I move the mouse around, that cursor is not only on the big screen, the mouse cursor appears here on the screen on the front of the radio. And so we can do click and pounce like that. And also, if you're clicking and pouncing on the top waterfall, it's going to be the main receiver that I'm pointing and clicking and pouncing. Or if I do it down here, it's going to be in the sub receiver. So we can do either or. And I just find it a little easier using the mouse to be accurate first time and tune it by dragging it up and down than it is doing it with the touch screen. I did mention as well that we have the USB sockets on the back that we can plug extra things into, and one thing that I'm very fond of is this fella here. This is the Icom RC28 controller. We've used it before actually in TX Factor when we showed you remote controlling an Icom rig. But if I plug that into the USB socket on the back, it now gives me another tuning knob, so we can tune the sub receiver or we can tune the main receiver, and we can do them independently of each other without having to highlight one or the other. The advantage of having virtually two radios in one box is we can do two different things at once. So let's do a demo of that. Now this is brilliant because anybody who's set up a radio to use it, say with FT8, or to use it with remote control, or with other various external things that you might control with the radio to set it up to work with the linear, is you're going to have to make adjustments to how the CIV settings are set up. And that can be a problem because you've got it set up for one thing, then you want to use another thing. So for example, I've got this one set up, all the CIV settings are set up so that it will work with the linear, which we'll be showing in a separate review, the brand new Icom linear. But then if you wanted to use it on FT8, you'd have to go in there and you'd have to do all those settings individually, and you'd have to go into the CIV and find all the bits you want. It's all a bit complicated. So isn't it great if you could set up a memory? And you can. So my settings for using it with my external FT8 program. So I'm going to load up the FT8 settings. There we go. And now what it's done is it's changed the CIV and all the other settings within the radio to work happily with my FT8 software. So if I fire that up, so there we are, happily monitoring FT8 on 40 meters, and then we can turn the volume up on the other radio, and we can have a tune around on 20 meters. So there we're able to use both sides of the radio to be doing different things. And if we want to transmit on FT8, we're set up to do that because we're on the main receiver transmit side, and that's set up for transmit. Or we could swap it over. So if we hear somebody we want to work on 20 meters, we can make that our transmit side and talk to them and still leave that monitoring the FT8. There's only one thing I haven't done yet, and that's use it on air. So let's plug the mic in and stretch its legs on 40 meters. There we go. It's an empty frequency. Is this frequency in use, please? Okay, let's just tune her up. And we're on antenna 1, which is my G5RV, and the auto tuner tuned that quite happily. Hello CQ, hello CQ. This is Golf 0, Foxtrot Golf X-Ray, Golf 0, Foxtrot Golf X-Ray, calling CQ40, CQ40, G0FGX in the county of Cornwall, calling CQ40 meters and listening. Isn't that typical? Nobody ever answers when we want them to, when we're doing it live on air. But there we are, 200 watts PEP into my G5RV. What a great radio. Well, that's it. Our very exciting look at the brand new flagship Icom HF radio, the 7760. And I think we've shown you quite a lot of what it does, but there is a lot more that you could delve into, and all the details of all your menus and settings you will find in the basic manual and the advanced manual, both of which you can download from the Icom website. I'm not a CW operator, so I haven't really mentioned CW, but it is great for the CW operator. It's got a built-in CW keyer, an electronic keyer, multifunction. It also has an FPGA controlled keying waveform, so it's a beautifully SDR generated keying waveform, which will be lovely and clean, and you'll put a lovely note on the air. And also there's auto repeat function within the keyer, normal, or you can have the short Morse number style in it, and also you can change all your filter widths and everything else to make it sound on receive and on transmit just how you want it. It comes with the control cable, which is about 9 foot long, so I think that's about 3 meters. And of course, you've seen how good the display is. We've got a 7-inch main color display, 2.4-inch sub display, and they're both crystal clear and really easy to see what you're doing. You can put it on the monitor as well because of that external display option, which we've also demonstrated. And it's touchscreen, so a lot of the things that you can do with it, you can do through the touchscreen. And for anybody who's used one of the Icom radios like the 7300, the 705 or the 9700, you can pretty much get this out of the box and use it because the menus are large and easy to read on the 7-inch touchscreen, giving easy access to key functions like recording and playing back voice recordings for CQ and contest calls, or editing the 100 memories and naming them. And whenever text input is required, a full keyboard appears on the screen. On the set menu screen, we can access all the key settings. So one touch will take us, for example, to the CW keyer settings, or the DPD settings, or the setting up of all external connectors for PC control, digital modes, external mouse and keyboard and everything else. So if you already have a recent Icom radio, this menu layout will be very familiar, but it's really easy to use if you're encountering it for the first time. And the only sort of extra things, as we've shown you, are sorting out the antenna switching between the main and the sub and getting all that working as well. So all in all, it's a very high performance radio, 200 watts PEP, and remember, full duty cycle as well. So that it'll cruise along with that 200 watts on FM if you want, or on digi modes without breaking into a sweat. And I think that one of the biggest attractions of this is that it's such a small footprint radio to put on your desk. So if you don't have a lot of room in the shack, it's great because you can put the big box somewhere else, connect it up through your LAN and just have this on your desk.